The church bells had only just stopped ringing when Daniel found himself back inside the house that now felt colder than any grave. The scent of lilies from the funeral clung to his clothes, and though people had offered warm words, nothing seemed to reach him. He wandered aimlessly through the hallway, brushing his hand against the framed photographs, half expecting her smile to come alive and scold him for sulking. His wife, Margaret, had been his anchor for nearly 20 years. He thought he knew every corner of her heart. He thought wrong. Later that night, while sorting through her belongings in the bedroom they had shared, Daniel came across a leather-bound journal tucked beneath a stack of scarves. He assumed it might be filled with her thoughts during her final illness, reflections he was desperate to hold on to. With trembling fingers, he opened it, expecting to find comfort. Instead, the first page struck him like a knife. "My dearest Robert, the night you touched my hand beneath the stars, I knew I could never belong to anyone else." Daniel stared, unblinking. His heart pounded as if the room itself had closed in on him. Robert? Who was Robert? His wife had never mentioned that name, not in all the years they had lived together, shared dinners, raised children, endured sleepless nights. He flipped through the next few pages, each one a letter, written as if to a lover. Margaret described encounters in places Daniel had never known she visited, old motels on the highway, hidden cafes across town. She wrote of revenge, too. How she had humiliated a neighbor who once betrayed her trust, how she manipulated her sister into selling a piece of land for far less than it was worth. The Margaret on these pages was sharp, vindictive, burning with desires he never glimpsed in their life together. Daniel closed the journal and pressed it against his chest, unsure if he wanted to scream, cry, or laugh at the absurdity. His wife, his Margaret, had lived a secret life beside him, and he had been blind to it all. For hours he sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the shadows on the wall, the journal heavy in his lap. The silence around him was no longer peaceful, it was suffocating. He wondered if anyone else knew. Did their children? Did the neighbors whisper about this Robert? Was he the only fool in the story? He tried to tell himself it was fiction, some elaborate form of therapy Margaret had invented to distract herself during her illness. But the details were too precise, the emotions too raw. The handwriting he recognized, the way she looped her letters, the little flourishes she added to her capitals. This was her. This was real. By dawn, Daniel hadn't slept. He returned to the journal, turning the pages with the reluctance of a man defusing a bomb. Each letter deepened the wound. "I can still feel your lips on mine when I close my eyes," she had written. "Sometimes, lying next to Daniel, I pretend it is you beside me, holding me, breathing with me." He slammed the book shut, while rising in his throat. It wasn't just betrayal. It was erasure. All those nights he thought he had comforted her, all those times he believed in their intimacy, she had been somewhere else, with someone else in her mind. The funeral replayed in his head. The sympathetic smiles of friends, the quiet nods of neighbors, the cautious condolences from family. Did they know? Was Robert among them, hidden behind a handshake in a black suit? The thought chilled him more than the December wind that rattled the window panes. Daniel shoved the journal into a drawer, but it seemed to hum beneath the wood, demanding to be read again. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, his hands shaking, spilling half of it onto the counter. He had never been a drinker, but tonight, grief was not enough to numb him. Betrayal demanded something stronger. By the time the clock struck noon, Daniel had resolved to confront the past. He would read every line, every word, until the truth revealed itself. Whether it destroyed him or not no longer mattered. He owed it to himself to know who his wife truly was. That evening, he attended a small gathering hosted by Margaret's sister, Clara, who insisted on keeping family close in the days after the funeral. The room smelled of casseroles and coffee, but Daniel could barely taste anything. He scanned faces, listening for laughter, searching for guilt. When Clara asked how he was holding up, he forced a smile. "I'm managing," he said, though inside he was unraveling. Every time someone mentioned Margaret's kindness, her patience, her loyalty, the words scraped against his heart like lies etched in stone. After dinner, Clara pulled him aside, her eyes soft with concern. "Daniel, she loved you, you know. Don't let the grief eat you alive." He nodded mutely, wishing he could ask her about Robert, about the venomous side of Margaret hidden in those pages. But fear kept him silent. Fear of exposing himself as the fool. Fear of shattering the fragile image everyone held of her. Back at home, he retrieved the journal again, unable to resist its pull. He flipped to the last entry, written just weeks before her death. If Daniel ever finds this, he will never forgive me. But the truth must live somewhere, even if it destroys him. His hands trembled so violently, he almost dropped the book. She had written it for him to find. This was no accident. This was a confession, a final act of cruelty or honesty he could not yet decipher. The room spun as he clutched the journal, realizing his life was no longer his own. It belonged to the secrets she left behind, to the ghost of Robert, to the revenge-laced memories that painted a woman he no longer recognized. And as he closed the journal once more, he whispered into the emptiness, "Why, Margaret? Why me?" He had no answer, only the echo of his own voice and the heavy knowledge that the story was just beginning. The days after Margaret's funeral blurred together like smudged ink, yet Daniel could not escape the journal's grip. Each night he returned to it, as if punishing himself by peeling back layers of her double life. What began as shock became obsession. He cataloged names, places, dates, trying to piece together the puzzle. There was mention of a Robert meeting her near Willow Creek Motel on Thursdays, a description of a silver watch he wore, even the taste of the cigarettes he smoked. These were not fantasies. They were details too vivid to ignore. Daniel drove to the motel one evening, his stomach twisted into knots. The neon sign flickered weakly, the parking lot nearly empty. He stood there, staring at the peeling paint, wondering if Margaret had walked across that very ground smiling for another man. He could almost see her, her coat pulled tight, eyes searching the lot until Robert appeared. Rage bubbled inside him. But before he could lose control, the clerk behind the counter poked his head out and asked if Daniel needed a room. Daniel shook his head and left quickly, feeling the clerk's eyes linger on him with quiet suspicion. Back in town, whispers followed him. Maybe they were always there, but now he heard them louder. Mrs. Kelsey, the neighbor, gave him a long glance while watering her garden, then turned away as if ashamed. At the grocery store, two men lowered their voices when he walked by. Paranoia crept in. Did they know about Robert? Did they know about the lies? When Daniel tried to ask subtle questions, whether anyone remembered Margaret spending time away, whether she had secret friendships, people grew evasive. She was a private woman, Mrs. Kelsey finally told him, her voice clipped. Sometimes it's best to leave the dead alone. That sentence stung. Leave the dead alone? How could he, when the dead had carved open his heart with secrets? The more he searched, the colder people became. It was as if an invisible wall had risen between him and the community. Even his daughter, Hannah, called from college and asked him to stop digging. "Dad, please, Mom's gone. Whatever you're looking for, it won't change anything." But it would, Daniel thought bitterly. It already had. The truth was unraveling everything he thought he knew. One evening he drove past Robert's supposed meeting place again, and this time he spotted a man sitting on a bench, gray-haired, wearing a silver watch. Daniel's pulse spiked. Could it be him? He approached slowly, rehearsing words of confrontation. But before he reached the bench, the man stood and walked away, slipping into a car. Daniel caught only the last 3 digits of the license plate. He considered following but froze, rooted by fear. Fear of what he might confirm. That night, he returned to the journal, flipping forward until a passage caught his eye. Clara suspects nothing. She never understood that I could love Robert and still play the devoted wife. She underestimates me as always. Daniel's hands clenched. Clara, Margaret's sister, the one who had embraced him at the funeral, whispering comfort, had apparently been deceived too. Or had she? Doubt wormed its way deeper. Maybe Clara knew, maybe the whole family knew, and they had kept him in the dark for years. He decided to confront her. The following Sunday, he visited Clara's house. She welcomed him with tea, her usual warmth, but Daniel noticed how her eyes flicked nervously when he mentioned Margaret's journals. Journals? She repeated, stirring sugar into her cup. Margaret never told me she was keeping journals. Daniel studied her face, searching for cracks, but she held her expression. She wrote about Robert, he said finally, watching her reaction. Clara's spoon clattered against the saucer. Robert? She whispered, almost too faint to hear. Her hand trembled as she reached for the cup again. I don't know what you found, Daniel, But you need to stop. Margaret had a way of twisting stories. Don't take everything she wrote as truth. He pressed harder. So you admit you knew something. Clara shook her head, her voice firm now. I'm saying Margaret wasn't well. Near the end, she was confused, angry. She made up stories. Don't let her words poison you. Daniel left unsatisfied, suspicion gnawing at him. Her reaction had been too sharp, too defensive. The next day, he found a folded note slipped under his door. No signature, just 6 words scrawled in uneven handwriting. Stop digging or you'll regret it. His blood ran cold. Someone was watching him. Someone knew he was reading the journals. He rushed inside and tore through the house, searching for signs of intrusion, but everything was in place. The journal lay on his desk, closed, but now it felt like a beacon, drawing danger to him. That night, he sat with it again, torn between fear and compulsion. He turned to a passage where Margaret described humiliating a man named Thompson, forcing him to confess a debt publicly to save herself from scandal. Daniel recognized the name. Henry Thompson, a longtime neighbor who had barely looked at him since the funeral. Pieces were falling together, though they painted an uglier picture each time. Margaret hadn't just betrayed him with Robert. She had manipulated half the town. Now those people wanted silence. The air in the house grew heavier with every page. Daniel felt hunted, cornered by both the living and the dead. He whispered aloud, "What did you do, Margaret?" But no answer came, only the echo of his own desperation. Then, as he closed the journal for the night, he noticed fresh handwriting at the back, words he had somehow overlooked before. Different ink, shakier strokes, but undoubtedly hers. If you're still reading, Daniel, beware. They will come for you too. His breath caught. Who were they? Neighbors, family, Robert himself? Panic surged through him, yet curiosity burned brighter. The journal was no longer just a confession. It was a warning, and the warning had come too late. Daniel had grown accustomed to silence, but now every creak in the house felt like a threat. Every shadow on the wall seemed to move with intent. He kept the journal close, hidden beneath his pillow at night, though he doubted it was truly safe anywhere. The anonymous note still burned in his mind. Stop digging, or you'll regret it. He could not shake the feeling that someone in the neighborhood was watching his every move. For days, he avoided people, speaking only when necessary. But the isolation made him reckless. He decided to visit Margaret's old friend, Evelyn, a woman he had rarely spoken to, though Margaret used to spend long afternoons at her house. Evelyn lived in a small bungalow at the edge of town, surrounded by a garden of withered roses that seemed abandoned after Margaret's death. When Daniel knocked, Evelyn opened the door slowly, her sharp eyes studying him. "You shouldn't be here," she said before he had spoken a word. "What do you mean?" Daniel asked, startled. "Margaret told me you might come," Evelyn replied, her voice low, almost conspiratorial. "She said if you ever found her journals, you'd want answers. But answers come with danger." Daniel's chest tightened. "So you know about Robert?" Evelyn sighed, motioning him inside. The house smelled of old books and fading perfume, the air heavy with secrets. "Robert was real," she admitted. "But Margaret never loved him the way you think. He was part of something bigger." She walked to a cabinet and pulled out a faded photograph. Margaret, younger, smiling with 2 other people, Evelyn and a man Daniel did not recognize. The man wore the same silver watch Daniel had seen at the park. "That's him," Daniel whispered. Evelyn nodded. Robert wasn't just a lover. He was leverage. Margaret was trapped in something she couldn't escape, and Robert was both her weakness and her weapon. Daniel felt the floor tilt beneath him. "What do you mean, trapped?" Evelyn poured tea with unsteady hands. "Your wife was clever, Daniel. Too clever. She knew people's secrets, their sins. She kept them in those journals, not just as confessions, but as protection. If someone crossed her, she had the means to destroy them. Robert was her confidant, sometimes her accomplice. But it wasn't love, not truly. It was survival." Daniel's throat tightened. "So all those letters, pretending I was him when she lay next to me?" Evelyn's eyes softened. Some of it was real, some of it theater. Margaret blurred the line between truth and performance. That was her gift and her curse. Daniel wanted to slam the table, to shout, but exhaustion weighed him down. "Why didn't she tell me?" Evelyn looked at him as if he were a child. "Because she was protecting you. Or perhaps she thought ignorance was mercy. Either way, she believed you were too kind to carry the darkness she carried. Daniel clenched his fists. Protecting him? By deceiving him? The logic cut deep. Before he could argue, Evelyn leaned closer. You need to stop asking questions in town. People are nervous. Margaret exposed them in her writings. Some of the most respected neighbors, even family, owe their reputations to her silence. If they think you'll reveal her secrets, they won't hesitate to silence you. Daniel's mind raced back to the warning note, to Clara's trembling hands, to the suspicious looks from neighbors. Then what am I supposed to do? Evelyn slid a small box across the table. Inside lay another journal, thinner, bound in red leather. Margaret left this with me, for you. She said it would answer what you feared most. Daniel hesitated, his hand hovering over the journal. Part of him wanted to throw it into the fire, to end this nightmare, but his hunger for truth outweighed his fear. He opened it carefully, scanning the first lines. The words made his blood run cold. Daniel deserves to know the truth about Hannah. She is not his. His vision blurred. His daughter? Not his. He read further, hands shaking. Margaret described an affair, the timing aligning with Hannah's birth, the secrecy surrounding it. She admitted her guilt, but also her conviction that raising Hannah as Daniel's child was the best choice. The journal slipped from his hands, crashing to the floor. His knees weakened, and he clutched the edge of the table to keep from falling. Evelyn's face was pale, her eyes filled with pity. I didn't want to show you, she whispered, but Margaret insisted you had to know one day. Daniel felt as though his entire body had been hollowed out. Hannah, his daughter, the light of his life, the reason he endured long hours at work, the one who had hugged him at the funeral and whispered that they would get through this. She was not his by blood. Every memory of her childhood now felt tainted, poisoned by doubt. Who? He asked, his voice cracking. Evelyn shook her head. Margaret never named him in that journal. Perhaps Robert, perhaps another. She wanted you to know the betrayal, but not the source. Rage and sorrow twisted together inside him, an unbearable knot. He slammed his fist onto the table, startling Evelyn. She destroyed me, he said hoarsely. She loved her secrets more than she loved me. Evelyn's gaze hardened. Or maybe she believed you loved her enough to survive the truth. But now the choice is yours, Daniel. Keep digging, and you risk losing everything left. Or stop, and let the lies remain buried with her. Daniel staggered to his feet, gripping the red journal like a weapon. I can't stop. Not now. Not after this. Evelyn's voice followed him as he stormed out. Then be ready. They won't forgive you for uncovering what she left behind. As Daniel walked into the night, clutching the journal, he felt the weight of the truth pressing down harder than ever. His marriage was a lie, his daughter perhaps not his own, his community complicit in secrets he had barely begun to uncover. The darkness that Margaret carried was now his, whether he wanted it or not. And somewhere in that darkness, enemies waited. Daniel no longer recognized the reflection in the mirror. His eyes were sunken, his hair disheveled, his jaw set in perpetual tension. He had read and reread the red journal until the words etched themselves into his brain, tormenting him. Every time Hannah's voice called Dad, his heart fractured, wondering if the word was built on a lie. Yet he could not confront her. Not yet. Not until he had proof. Proof meant digging deeper, even if it cost him everything. And cost him it did. The neighbors no longer smiled politely when he passed. Conversations fell silent the moment he entered a room. He caught curtains twitching, shadows lingering at the edge of his property at night. He knew they wanted him to stop. He also knew Evelyn had not told him everything. He returned to her bungalow one evening, rain pouring hard against the windows. I need the truth, he demanded. Evelyn shook her head, trembling. Daniel, you don't understand. Margaret's journals weren't just about affairs. They contained names, powerful names. Judges, businessmen, even the pastor. She had leverage over half this town. His chest tightened. And now they think I have it. Evelyn nodded. Exactly. If they believe you'll expose them, they'll destroy you. Margaret walked a razor's edge all her life. You're not built for it. Her words stung. Maybe she was right. He had always been the quiet one, the reliable one, the man who worked hard and asked for little. But now he was carrying Margaret's sins like stones tied to his ankles. Then help me, he whispered. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. I already have. By warning you. She gripped his hand. Please, Burn the journals. Let Hannah live free of this poison. Otherwise, she didn't finish. Fear made her throat close. That night, Daniel considered it. He stacked the journals on the kitchen table, staring at them under the dim light. He imagined fire consuming them, the secrets turning to ash. But as he reached for the matches, Hannah's laugh echoed in his memory, and Margaret's words from the red journal stabbed through him. She is not his. Rage surged again. If he burned them, he would never know who Hannah's father was, never know the full truth of the woman he had loved and buried. He slammed the matches down and shoved the journals back into their hiding place. The next morning, his car tires were slashed. A dead crow lay on his porch, its wings pinned with nails. The message was clear: stop. Hannah noticed, eyes wide with fear, but Daniel lied. Just kids messing around. At night, he barely slept, listening for footsteps outside. His paranoia grew until he no longer knew if the whispers he heard were real or in his head. One evening, as he walked home, two men cornered him near the alley by the grocery store. Faces he recognized, neighbors, men who had attended Margaret's funeral, men who once shook his hand. One leaned close, his breath sour. You think you're the only one who lost her? You think you get to drag us all down with you? Daniel's fists clenched, but he forced his voice steady. I just want the truth. The man's eyes hardened. Truth doesn't matter here. Silence does. They shoved him against the wall, hard enough to bruise his ribs. Stop digging, or next time it won't just be a warning. When they left, Daniel staggered home, his body aching, his spirit close to breaking. He collapsed in the living room, clutching his side, the journals still hidden nearby. For the first time, he wondered if Evelyn had been right, if he was not built for this. The collapse was inevitable. Hannah noticed the bruise on his face the next morning. Dad, what happened? She asked, her voice trembling. He forced a smile. Just slipped, nothing serious. But she didn't believe him. Her eyes searched his face, and he feared she saw the truth unraveling inside him. That night, he opened the red journal again, desperate for answers. He flipped to the last page, one he hadn't noticed before, tucked inside the back cover. A letter addressed to him, written in Margaret's hurried script. Daniel, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. I never wanted you to bear this burden, but you deserve to know. Hannah's father is someone you know, someone close. Protect her from the truth if you can, because if she learns it, she will never forgive me, or you. Daniel dropped the letter, his hands shaking uncontrollably. Someone close. The words echoed through him like a death knell. His mind raced through possibilities. Robert, yes, but perhaps someone even nearer. A friend? A family member? The pastor? The collapse of certainty crushed him. He no longer knew whom to trust, what was real. Every face he saw the next day seemed guilty, every handshake laced with betrayal. He started drinking at night, just enough to numb the sharp edges of despair. The house grew colder, quieter, as he drifted further from Hannah, unable to meet her eyes. And yet, even as he crumbled, the journals called to him. The secrets whispered from their pages, daring him to uncover more. He knew he was standing at the edge of ruin. He knew one wrong step could shatter what little remained of his life. But he also knew he could not stop. Daniel woke with a start. The journals spread around him like corpses after battle, his head pounding from whiskey and exhaustion. The letter from Margaret burned in his mind. Someone close, someone who could destroy Hannah's world if the truth came out. He knew he could not keep drifting in shadows. The time had come for confrontation, for tearing the veil away no matter the cost. He decided to go directly to Robert. If Margaret's words pointed to anyone, it had always circled back to him, her confidant, her lover, the man who had hovered on the edges of Daniel's life like a dark reflection. Daniel found him sitting on the porch, sipping coffee as if the world had never changed. We need to talk, Daniel said, voice raw. Robert gave a weary smile. About her, I assume. You knew, Daniel accused, his hands shaking, the journals clutched under his arm. You were closer to Margaret than anyone. Tell me the truth, was it you? Robert stared at him, then let out a long sigh. I loved her, Daniel. More than you'll ever admit. But no, Hannah is not mine. If she were, I would have claimed her. Margaret was entangled with more than me. And if you think I'll carry your burden of proof, you're mistaken. Daniel's chest caved under the weight of his own desperation. Then who? Who was close enough? Robert leaned forward, his eyes dark. Do you really want that truth? Because once you know, you'll never see this town, or your daughter, the same way again. Before Daniel could reply, Hannah appeared on the porch, clutching the red journal she had found where he thought it was hidden. Her face was pale, her eyes blazing with confusion. "Dad, what is this?" she demanded. Daniel froze, panic rushing through him. He reached out, but she pulled away. "I read enough. Mom wrote that you might not be my father. Is it true?" Silence thickened the air. Robert looked at Daniel, daring him to speak. Daniel's throat closed, but he forced words out. "I don't know, Hannah. I don't know anymore." Her lip trembled, her voice breaking. "You lied to me. My whole life, was it a lie?" She turned and ran, the journal clutched to her chest. Daniel stumbled after her, calling her name, but she vanished into the night. He collapsed in the yard, his body shaking with despair. Robert crouched beside him, voice low. "This is what Margaret wanted. To control us, even from the grave. But now it's on you, Daniel. Do you keep chasing the truth, or do you save your daughter?" Daniel staggered to his feet, determination clawing through the fog. He could not let Hannah drown in Margaret's shadows. He searched the house, the streets, finally finding her near the old church, sitting on the steps with tears streaming down her face. "Hannah," he whispered, approaching slowly. She glared at him, eyes red. "Tell me the truth. Was Robert my father? Someone else? Who am I?" Daniel knelt, his hands trembling. "I don't know for certain. But listen to me. None of that matters. You are mine. You've always been mine. Blood doesn't make us family, love does." She shook her head, sobbing. "You don't understand. If I don't know who I am, then what's left of me?" Daniel pulled the final letter from the journal, the one Margaret had left, and placed it in Hannah's hand. "Read this. She wanted to protect you from the truth because she feared it would destroy you. And she was right. It could destroy us both. But we still have a choice. To live in her shadows or to break free." Hannah read, her hands shaking. When she finished, she looked at him with eyes torn between rage and sorrow. "So you're asking me to bury it? To live with a lie?" "No," Daniel said fiercely. "I'm asking you to live with love. To know that I chose you every day, and I will keep choosing you, no matter what Margaret wrote." For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then headlights flooded the churchyard. A car pulled up, and men stepped out. The same men who had threatened Daniel before. Their faces were grim, their movements deliberate. One carried a bat, another a gun barely hidden under his jacket. Hannah gasped, clutching Daniel's arm. "What's happening?" Daniel stood, placing himself in front of her. "Stay behind me." The men closed in. "We told you to stop, Daniel," the leader said coldly. "But you couldn't. Now the girl knows. That can't stand." Daniel's blood turned to fire. They wanted to erase Margaret's secrets, even if it meant harming Hannah. He would not let that happen. He stepped forward, fists clenched. "If you touch her, I swear I'll bury every one of your names with the journals. The world will know what you've done, who you are." The man sneered. "You won't live long enough." The standoff thickened, a breath away from violence. Hannah, shaking, stepped beside Daniel instead of behind him. Her voice cracked, but carried strength. "You can't scare us. Whatever my mother did, it's over. You don't control us." The men hesitated, taken aback by her defiance. Daniel seized the moment, pulling Hannah toward the church doors. "Run," he shouted. They bolted inside, slamming the heavy wooden doors behind them. The men pounded on the outside, shouting threats, but Daniel held the lock, his body braced against it. Hannah cried, terrified, but Daniel whispered fiercely, "We will not break. Not now." The pounding grew louder, splintering the wood, but in that moment Daniel felt something shift inside him. No longer the quiet man, no longer the broken husband. He was a father fighting for his child, even against an entire town if he had to. He knew they would not last long, but he also knew the choice had been made. Truth or silence, survival or surrender. And he chose to fight, no matter the cost. The doors of the church shuddered under the men's assault, each blow echoing like thunder through the hollow sanctuary, but Daniel's body pressed firm against the wood, his muscles burning with defiance. Hannah clung to his arm, her face streaked with tears, her voice trembling as she whispered, "They're going to break through, Dad. We can't stop them." Daniel turned to her, his eyes fierce, his voice steady despite the fear inside him. "We don't need to stop them, Hannah. We need to outlast them. We need to show them that Margaret doesn't control us anymore, and neither do they. The words seemed to steel her. She wiped her eyes, lifted her chin, and nodded. The wood cracked again, and a fragment splintered, letting a shaft of night air pierce through. The threat was real, immediate, but so was the choice: surrender to the weight of Margaret's legacy, or claim a future forged in truth and defiance. Daniel's heart thundered as he spotted the dusty altar at the front of the church. On it, a brass candle holder gleamed, heavy enough to be a weapon. He grabbed it, thrusting it into Hannah's hands. If they come through, you run to the back door. Don't look back. Hannah stared at him, horror in her eyes. I'm not leaving you. You will if you want to live, he snapped, then softened. But if we stand together, we'll make them bleed before they ever touch us. The pounding ceased suddenly. Silence descended, sharp and suffocating. Then came a voice, calm, almost mocking. Daniel, you've always been stubborn. But you can't hold that door forever. Give us the journals, and maybe we'll let the girl walk away. Keep them, and this ends with both of you buried in shadows. Daniel's grip tightened, the choice crystallizing in his mind. He could hand over Margaret's writings, erase every trace of her betrayals, and maybe save Hannah's life. But it would mean surrendering not only her truth, but their own power to those who thrived on silence. He looked at Hannah, her eyes wide, her body trembling but her spirit unbroken. What do you want me to do? He whispered. Hannah held his gaze, her voice steady despite the quiver in her lip. Don't let them win. Not like this. The words struck him like a blade. Margaret had tried to bury them in secrets, and these men wanted to finish the job. But Hannah, his daughter, chose courage over fear. He nodded, the decision sealing in his bones. Then we fight. The doors burst open with a final crack, the men storming inside like a wave of fury and violence. Daniel roared, hurling himself at the first intruder, the candle holders swinging with raw desperation. The clash was brutal, chaotic, echoes of struggle filling the sacred space. Hannah darted to his side, striking one attacker with surprising strength, her scream tearing through the air. Blood stained the church floor, fists and rage clashing under the gaze of silent saints carved in stone. Yet for every blow they delivered, more came back, the odds overwhelming. Daniel's body screamed with pain, but he fought with the ferocity of a man who had nothing left to lose except the child he swore to protect. At last, the men faltered, not broken but startled by the resistance, by the refusal to submit. Their leader spat blood on the floor, snarling. This isn't over. You think you've won, but you've only bought time. The truth will eat you alive. Then, like shadows, they retreated into the night, leaving Daniel and Hannah bruised, bleeding, but alive. Silence fell again, broken only by their ragged breaths. Daniel collapsed to his knees, clutching Hannah as she sobbed into his shoulder. He whispered, over and over, we made it. We're still here. Dawn broke through the stained glass windows, painting the sanctuary in fractured light. The night had ended, but their war with Margaret's legacy was far from over. Later, back at the house, Hannah sat with the journals spread before her, her fingers tracing the ink of her mother's hand. What do we do now? She asked, her voice hollow, exhausted. Daniel sat across from her, his face bruised, his spirit heavy but unbroken. We decide who we want to be. Margaret wrote these to trap us, to bind us in secrets and guilt. But we don't have to play her game. Hannah's hands trembled. Do we burn them? Hide them? Or tell the world? Daniel hesitated, the weight of the choice crushing him. Burn them, and the truth vanished, buried forever. Reveal them, and they would unleash chaos, perhaps even death. Hide them, and the cycle would continue. He looked at Hannah, and for once, he let the choice rest with her. What do you want? She stared at the journals, her jaw tightening. I want to stop being afraid. I want to live without her shadow. Slowly, she gathered the journals, one by one, and carried them outside. Daniel followed, his chest tight, as she lit a match and dropped it onto the pile. Flames roared, pages curling and blackening, Margaret's words turning to ash under the rising sun. They stood side by side, the fire reflecting in their eyes, the smoke carrying away years of torment. Yet even as the last embers died, Daniel knew the fire within them would not so easily extinguish. She's gone, Hannah whispered, her voice breaking. Finally gone. Daniel pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. She'll never haunt us again. But remember, our choices today will haunt us if we let them. We move forward, Hannah, together. And yet, as the ashes cooled, an unease lingered. What had been destroyed could not erase the scars already carved into their lives. They had chosen love over truth, survival over revelation, but the question would remain. Had they freed themselves, or had they only buried another secret, waiting to rise again? The wind shifted, carrying a faint trace of smoke and something darker, a reminder that some legacies never die, they only change form. Hannah looked at him, her eyes uncertain, her voice a whisper. What if the truth was still out there, Dad? What if someone else knows? Daniel stared at the horizon, the morning light spreading like fragile hope across the land. Then we'll face it when it comes. But until then, we live, we love, and we never look back. The silence that followed was heavy, but in it lay a fragile peace, fragile enough to break with a single knock on the door, a single revelation, a single echo of Margaret's voice. And though the world might one day come calling, Daniel and Hannah knew that when it did, they would no longer face it as broken shadows of Margaret's game. They would face it as father and daughter, united, defiant, and unafraid.